Hello everyone, my name's Hemingway Jones. Welcome to a special edition of the Hemingway Jones Pen Show. This is the place where we talk about fountain pens, inks, journals and journaling, and anything and everything that's going to keep you writing and keep you inspired. So thanks for joining me today. Today is our special question and answer episode, so I'm going to answer your questions. Thanks. Before we begin, I'd like to do a quick pen check. Today, I'm using the Montblanc 149. This, as you probably know, is one of my favorite pens, and I tend to bring it out when I'm doing something very important. And lately, in the business side of my life, I've been involved in some pretty tough negotiations. So, I wanted a pen that's going to give me a little extra boost of confidence. This pen is an amazing writer with a fantastically flowy, rich, responsive medium nib. It's just a joy to write with. The piston fill system is amazing. The styling is impeccable, timeless, and iconic. This is a pen from which all others are judged. It's just a fantastic pen. So I asked for your questions over at Instagram at Hemingway_Jones. Feel free to follow me there. And here at YouTube in the community section. And you guys had some excellent questions. Thank you very much for those. I'm going to try to get into as many of them as I can. So let's start with the first one. The first question is from Al Saikali, and he asks me to tell you guys about my background, my profession, my upbringing, how I got into pens, family, etc. I'll make it very brief, but I've been into fountain pens now for 30 years, and I've really dug deep into this rabbit hole. Anytime I get into a hobby, I take it very seriously and I just get very curious. So what drives me in this hobby is just a curiosity for the next experience. What a new nib feels like, what a different grind on a nib feels like, what a new ink might look like or a new sheet of paper. It's just a world of possibilities, and I also enjoy any hobby that has a lot of different variables that you can speak about and just have really interesting and good debates, and from where we can all learn so much. So that's how long I've been into pens. It's sort of my hobby, and it's also kind of an academic pursuit for me, if you will. The reason I got into pens in the first place is journaling. It has always been about the journaling to me. I journal every day. I journal in strange places. I journal constantly. It's a fantastic method to keep your mind in check, to stay productive, to write down your goals, to hold yourself accountable. I love journaling. I think it's so healthy and such a good thing for everyone. As for background, I grew up in Philadelphia. I moved to New England. I live in Massachusetts now. I've been here for around 25 years. I'm married to an amazing woman who you may have seen in some of the B-rolls, and I have a beautiful 5.5-year-old daughter. I have some other hobbies too. I used to be a very avid rock and ice climber, but I've sort of tamped that down since my daughter's been born. I'm also an avid reader, as you might imagine. I also write articles on fashion, on different subjects. You can find those over at stridewise.com, and I just stay engaged. My profession is financial services, where I'm a senior vice president at a bank. I'm in commercial lending. It's a fantastic, very intense and interesting job, and one in which I'm able to use pens pretty much every day. So I hope that gives you a bit of background on me. I'll try to open up a bit more as we go along so you can get to know me as this channel grows. Our next question is from Ian Knoll, and he's asking, what do I think has the biggest impact on the writing experience? The pen, the paper, or the ink? And why? This is a fantastic question. I love stuff like this, and I always make analogies when I think of things like this. So I think the nib of the pen is extremely important. To me, that's like the Pirelli tires. Imagine you have this beautiful sports car and then you buy cheap tires. Well, the tires are where your car touches the road, obviously. So you need a nice tire. Similarly, with a pen, the nib is where the pen touches the paper. So to me, quite a bit is involved in the nib. And since the nib is attached to the pen, in my opinion, is the most important. Because even if you have cheap paper, you can back off slightly, minusculely in pressure so that you're writing what would be very faint on a nice piece of Rhodia or Clairefontaine paper on a piece of loose leaf paper. So you can adapt to paper. Now, certainly other papers are more fun than some different papers, right? Rhodia is slick as an ice skating rink. Clairefontaine has a nice finish to it. The Ayush paper has a bit more texture, but is nice and thick and holds up even against the widest stubs and the craziest liquid inks. So each paper has its different characteristic, and it certainly complements the pen, but it's really the pen that drives it, in my opinion. Now, lastly comes the ink. And I feel sad putting ink in third place, but I do think it has the least influence on the writing experience. But that's not to diminish the influence and the impact that it has, because ink really delights you as you write. Certain sheens are magical and they're inspirational. And as you write something and you see it dry into this incredible red, or you see some shimmer emerge as if some pixies just passed along your words and sprinkled fairy dust onto them, that has a certain impact. It gives you a certain sense of delight and beguilement, if you will, that'll keep you writing, especially in the more lighter pursuits like journaling, as far as journaling's light, writing poetry and that sort of thing. In the business world, maybe you want a little bit more of a hardcore ink, but even in picking a basic blue or a basic black, certain characteristics like flow and shading will figure into that. So it is a big part of it, but I definitely would rank it pen, paper, ink. John Lopez asks, if I were able to go back in time and to purchase certain fountain pens, which ones would I go for? That's an amazing question. I love hypotheticals like that. I rather wish I had a TARDIS. I would have a lot of fun with that. So, okay, which pen am I going for? And it's actually just one. It's that elusive, perfect, in the box Waterman 52 with the flex nib. I would love to go back and grab that pen and discreetly sneak back into modern time with it. But it's a fantastic pen. I'd love to even find one now, but I've yet to get the right one in the right condition. But that's my dream vintage pen. Frank V asks how I store my pens and if I have any recommendations. Well, I don't have specific recommendations, and it's funny, until around 5 or 6 years ago, I was terrible at storing my pens. You guys would cringe if you saw how I stored my pens. I basically had boxes, and I just piled them in the box. I just didn't consider it as much as some of the other elements. And as much as I love pens, I consider them tools. Beautiful tools, but tools. So I'm not too concerned as they get scratches and whatnot. So I don't strive to keep them pristine. If I did, I would just put them away. It's like watches, right? If you want to keep a Rolex in fantastic shape, put it in your safe. If you're going to wear it, just accept that things are going to happen to it. And at that point, a lot can happen to it. But so I did that, but now I use the Girologio binders made out of leather with the elastic straps, and I bought them from Goulet, who's fantastic, and I love these things because I like shelving them, and they're on the shelf behind me so I can reach them at any time. Now, they're a good option, but they're not the best option, and I'll tell you what the big drawback is. You take a pen like the Benu Ambrosia and Orchid, Brown Orchid, it doesn't fit in there. The Kaweco Lilliput doesn't fit. A lot of Kavecos don't fit because their clips like to slide off. So anything thin or extremely fat or really short just don't work for those kind of storage devices. So the best thing would be to have one of the slot storage ones, maybe with some glass on top and such that you could stack them. I can envision some stacks of those going up in the library at some point. My pen collection is just growing exponentially now as I buy pens to talk about on this channel with you guys, and I'm seeing the drawbacks in something like the Girologio. As much as I like it, and I like that it keeps me organized, and let's face it, it's far better than throwing them in those boxes. Food asks, what is your favorite red ink? And I do have a favorite red ink. I love it. It's Diamine Oxblood. This ink is so perfect because red ink sometimes can look like correction colors. Something a teacher would correct your paper and hand it back to you. Pinnator's red ink looks a bit like that. Some of the others, I prefer more dark Gothic reds. And there are few as dark and Gothic as Oxblood. It's very visceral. It's a gorgeous scarlet red with really dark, intense shading and contrast. It looks fantastic on the page. It has a nice variation. You've seen it in this channel. I use it all the time. It's almost always in my Lamy Safari with their calligraphy nib on it. It's just a fantastic ink, and it's great for correspondence, and I even take it to the office sometimes. Just a brilliant red. Ron Ziger wants to buy his first gold nib pen and wants to know which one I would recommend. Well, that's easy. I would recommend the Pilot E95S. It has a gold nib with a lot of the characteristics of what makes a gold nib sought after. It's beautiful. It's inlaid. It's interesting looking. It has a bit of spring. It writes incredibly, and it's one of the coolest pens available. And the best part, it's a fantastic value at around $135. So for me, first gold nib pen purchase, it would be the Pilot E95S in a fine or a medium. Wilf Hunt over at Instagram asks, which pen was my biggest disappointment? And I hate to be negative, but I am a critic and I do have an opinion about everything, as I'm sure you've seen by now. So the biggest disappointment is the Pilot Falcon with the flex nib. It is just a so-so pen, and the fact that it costs nearly $200 is just outrageous. It feels sort of plasticky. The nib is nothing extraordinary. It's just a so-so pen. I'm not that enamored of it, and it was a big disappointment when I bought it. Also, both the Blue Dew and the Fountain Pen Revolution Flex pens, which are both a fraction of the Falcon's price, are so much better, so superior to it. And I love Pilot, guys. You know I do. Many of my favorite pens are Pilot. I've always made the analogy that Pilot is like Seiko in the watch world. I just love Pilot pens. But boy, the Falcon is just a big disappointment. Thank you all very much for these questions. I sincerely appreciate it. I appreciate all the support in the channel. We're now over 3,000 members, which is really exciting. I love growing our circle and getting more voices in the comments. I'm learning from you guys all the time, and I think this is a great dynamic place to learn quite a bit about fountain pens, inks, journals, and journaling, and writing. I want you guys to stay inspired. So I will be releasing more videos soon. Until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you further up the road.